Dun 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 dun. Hey everybody, welcome to TPIM. That's our live this Friday edition. This is coming from one of our viewers from Louisiana. After reviewing this piece, I'm like, yes, I have to run it tonight. I have to lead off the show with this. Well, you all been asleep. I'm going to show you how the game's really being played. We need decent folks to stand up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to be recognized to address you here on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. And I come to the floor today, Mr. Speaker, because this is the 1 year anniversary.
Sound a little bit like Porky Pig. That's all, folks. You guys had better listen up. This guy's really slick.
Anniversary of the date that a disparaging misquote in the New York Times was posted January 10th of 2019, this being January 10th of 2020. And I'm hopeful that this new year we have, 2020, will bring about some clarity of vision on the part of my colleagues, the American people. And I don't know that I have as much hope for the press. But this day, a year ago today, I was misquoted by the New York Times. And the Times alleged that I had used three terms and asked, why does that language become offensive? Well, the truth is that it was a 56-minute telephone interview, a call on my cell phone. I didn't have a way to tape it, but I have a practice over the years. I've done interviews with about any kind of medium I can think of. And if I don't have a means to tape what I say to them, I make it a point not to repeat anything, say anything that I haven't already said to the press. That way, there's nothing new out there for them to take and manipulate it in the article.
So what would be the point of even having an interview? Brother A1, Brother David, welcome to the show. What would be the point? It's always to give out new information. That right there should let everyone know. And wait, there's more to come. But he is already guarded and hiding.
Well, when that phone rang that morning on the 5th of January 2019, if that's a Friday morning, about 8:35 in the morning, I took the call, and I would have preferred to have done it in the office, but sometimes you need to get some work done and move on to other things, and that was part of the incentive. The reporter for the New York Times told me that he had been assigned by his chief editor to write an article about how it is that the immigration policy that I have advocated for at least since the first days I came to this Congress and years before that, so sometime around 2000 or so, that immigration policy, build the wall, end birthright citizenship, enforce the rule of law in sanctuary cities, the list of other things that have been part of what I have championed along the way here in this Congress. He was assigned to write an article on how it was that our President Donald Trump had adopted my immigration positions and gotten elected on those immigration positions. And now the national debate was surrounding the very topics that I had talked about for so long. Well, so we embarked upon a 56-minute interview. He didn't have a tape. I didn't have a tape. And I know he didn't have a tape for a couple of reasons. One of them was on an occasion or two, he asked me to carefully repeat the statement I had made so that he could type it down and get it accurate. That told me that's the ones that he's going to quote. It wasn't the one of controversy, however. And so subsequently, and then the second piece of it was, we asked him on the telephone in the following week, do you have a tape? His answer was, why do you want to know? And in that phone call would not answer the question as whether he had a tape. And we found out later on that he had admitted that there was no tape. And so we asked for his notes. He wouldn't release the notes. We asked him for the question that he had posed to me. And he wouldn't even speculate as to what the question was that he had posed to me in this 56-minute interview. He did assert that he can type as fast as anyone can talk, and he's highly trained on that and so skilled that the words would be perfect and so would the punctuation be perfect. Now, I'm here on the floor of this House of Representatives. We have some of the best stenographers in the world here. They get more practice in the House than anywhere else, and they talk slower in the Senate. And I've asked them, how fast can you type? A lot of them are about 130 words a minute on a conventional typewriter. And when they get to what I call the magic keyboard here, Mr. Speaker, then those words may go up to as many as 260 words a minute. And then I ask them, can you keep up with me when I am on a roll? And they say, no, we are always glad when you pause and let us catch up. These are the best there are anywhere. I can't believe that a reporter for the New York Times with a conventional, not a magic keyboard, can outpace the people on this floor that keep up with these fast-talking people in the House of Representatives, the very best there are in the world. That's not his skill set anyway. And so when he asserts that he would type it up accurately with utter precision and the punctuation would be correct, even when I ask the best in the world, what about the punctuation? Does that come out to be perfect too? They'll say, no, I have to go back and listen to the tape and make sure we get that part of it right. And we will get the words right, but the punctuation may be in question. So I have great respect for the skill sets here. I do not respect the response that he gave in defense because it is not believable that a reporter can be on a telephone on the other end typing at a speed that can, with the kind of precision necessary to settle the kind of cases that we have here. Nonetheless, when that story came out on the 10th of January, things blew up here in this Congress, and I immediately put out a statement that should have shut all that criticism down. I put it out with clarity. I clearly rejected more emphatically than anyone in this House of Representatives has, including the resolution that passed the following week, more clearly than anyone else has, the idea of the odious ideologies of white nationalism and white supremacy. Those are ideologies that didn't exist in my environment, any place that
Now, where in the hell did he grow up where that did not exist? This is the trick, folks. Thank you, Most High. If you listen with a keen ear, you're going to hear how he mixes up words and how he is going to envelop white supremacy in cloak of ignorance and as if it does not exist. So therefore, he can move sort of like on Star Wars, like Palpatine, without notice. Let's continue.
I was in all of my growing up and formative years and my adult years and my time here in this Congress. And when our minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, asked for a meeting with me on the following Monday,
welcome, Brother Easy D, to the show. Original, welcome to the show. Brother Al, welcome to the show. Peace and power, unity and victory. See, haters have their decent folks. This guy's a decent folk for haters. Reparations needs decent folks that can go into the hallowed halls of Congress and speak on our collective behalf, the citizenry. Let's continue.
Was his assertion that it has always meant the same thing. And I don't know how we know if it's language that's not been used or utilized. How do we know what it meant to people? You couldn't look up an ideology that's two words, not one, in this dictionary, this huge dictionary over here. You won't be able to look up white nationalism or white supremacy there.
Just because it does not appear in your dictionary does not mean, sir, it does not exist. On the contrary, it just means that it's so powerful, it determines the actual language which should be used to describe it. That's some sure enough power. Let's continue.
There, because that's a phrase and it's an ideology that ties two words together with a meaning that perhaps could be different. And so I had said in an interview with Dave Price, WHO TV, in October 20th of 2018, he had asked me the question, what is a white nationalist? And I said, it might have meant something different 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, but today it implies racist. And so I knew that because
since when has that ever not applied racist? Like I was saying the other day, as soon as they go to us versus them mentality, it's a wrap. It's a rapola. Let's continue.
been paying attention to the weaponization of language. And this is what the left has been doing. They've been calling people racist for 20, 25 years. And they've watched as Republicans, especially Southern conservative Republicans, curl up away from that kind of accusation and it shuts them down. And I recall.
And he's saying that like that's a bad thing. Sister Sandra, peace and power. He's saying it like that's a bad thing. You have to understand the spirit in which he's talking. Welcome to the show, Sister Michelle, I believe, Bob, Rewards Club, black owned business, I believe. Welcome back to the show. It's good to have you here. The devil's in the details on this one, guys and girls. Listen up.
The conversation that I related actually to the New York Times reporter in that 56-minute interview, and in my answer to the question, whatever it was that he asked me, what had happened in February of 2013.
Peace and power, Sister Barbara. Welcome to the show.
And that was an immigration meeting down the hallway over towards the Senate side, where we had a discussion about immigration with 4 or 5 senators and 5 or 6 House members and some non-government representatives that were also there at the table and around the table. And it was the first time that I met Senator Ted Cruz. And he had made a statement that we need to be very careful with the language we use, especially on immigration.
Yeah, because you don't want to appear to be what you truly are. And this is tough. It's tough times in many ways for haters. But I'm fearing, y'all, it's fixing to get easier for them. It's fixing to get easier.
Because if we use any language that is offensive, they will use it against us. And I listened to that and I thought I better respond. And I said, well, Senator, I agree with what you said, but we also need to keep in mind that whatever language is effective, if we let them to define that which is offensive, whatever language is effective will be defined as offensive. And
that's why when you had people who would unrepentantly use the N-word describing social issues pertaining specifically to melanated people, Black folks, you see how the people who determine what is basically decent and what is vulgar, you can't say that word. I mean, the question's been asked, how many Black people were on the panel that says, you know what, from now on, you cannot say the word nigger. You have to say nigga, or you have to say the N-word, or else you just have to go beep and then continue on your phrase, whatever. Just like the press meeting yesterday. When President Trump came into that room, Michael Pence standing on his left-hand side. How many races were representative behind him? All those high-ranking generals. How many sexes were represented behind him? And it wasn't by coincidence. It was all old white males. You had better wake up. And if you look into the eyes of some of them generals, oh my God, heaven help you. Those guys are straight killers. You could just see it in their face. But that's neither here nor there. Let's continue.
And I waited for his answer, which was essentially a nod, which I took to mean an agreement with me, and I believe it was, because it was certainly a logical statement and it was objective. So I set this up this way, Mr. Speaker, so that when I lay out this case, it's going to be clearly understood by all who are paying attention. And that says, I'm just going to take the term white nationalist. That's what Kevin McCarthy was so concerned about, and believing that it confirmed some kind of a hidden ideology in me that no one had been able to discover in personal contact with me, that had been discovered by the New York Times reporter over the telephone. And he argued that the response I gave that it might have meant something different 1 or 2 or 3 years ago exposed that I didn't know that it was a negative connotation that had to do with white nationalism, that somehow.
Once again, unless you're a part of the white nationalist scene, where do you not understand that white nationalist has a history of being rather brutal on the street level with black folks, with gay folks, with trans folks, with so-called biracial folks. I mean, there's a lot of people that has been hit by the tsunami, the wave that is white hate. And I don't understand, where is he? Yes, he's straight up lying. I mean, I'm not saying he's lying like that in a way that he can sue me. I'm just giving commentary right now, like any good news broadcaster should. You shouldn't just be blah, blah, blah. It should be a certain point of view. And I'm your guys' Obi-Wan. I'm going to tell this Earth War story from a certain point of view. And it's a point of view that hopefully good, decent people will recognize and be like, you know what? He's absolutely right. It's time that we take these old, lying-ass, wicked dudes to task. Don't hurt them. Don't do nothing to them, but seize the power that they wield and repurpose it so that everyone can prosper in this thing we call the United States of America. But oh boy here is going to take that and twist it. And you're going to watch and mock my words. People who are railing on white supremacy, their voices will be silenced this year. Let's continue.
Or another, he signed another belief system to me, which is what generally the left does. And so I asked for 24 hours to disprove this. He said, you've got 1 hour, and walked out of the room. 1 hour. Well, it takes a lot of digging. I disproved it clearly, but not in an hour. So what I have here that I'd like to show you, Mr. Speaker, is this.
Got a graph. I'm just walking around for graph.
What did the term white nationalism mean in the year 2000 when it was virtually unused?
Oh my God. So he's never heard of Dr. Francis Welsing, or he's never heard of Dr. Abdul Khalid Muhammad. He's never heard of Dick Gregory. This dude's never heard Marcus Garvey, Steve Coakley. Fuck, this dude never even heard of, Carl Nelson's show. I mean, what the fuck? When the term white supremacy in 2000 meant this or therefore, like, where the fuck has this clown been at? Let's continue.
Prior to that, when it was also virtually unused. Then what did it mean in 2001, 2, 3, all the way up? You can see that it's virtually unused all the way up until it never even starts to move until 2015. This
until 2015. Man, this is bullshit. So see, this is what I'm telling you. This is what I'm telling you. He's setting this up that is basically the new black media. What really hit the scene in about 2015? Professor Black, the Black Authority, channels such as that. But not all the ancestors in the 70s and 60s and 50s and fucking early 1900s, the end of the 1800s, go all the way to Frederick Douglass and all of them. By his little graph right there, just shitted on all those people like they did not fucking exist. We're going to replay. This is a triggering point for me, so please bear with me. We're replaying it for the uninitiated.
For you, Mr. Speaker, is this. What did the term white nationalism mean in the year 2000 when it was virtually unused? Or in any year prior to that when it was also virtually unused? Then what did it mean in 2001, 2, 3, all the way up? You can see that it's virtually unused all the way up until it never even starts to move until 2015. This is a LexisNexis search of the term white nationalism or white nationalist derivatives of this term. And LexisNexis, Mr. Speaker, goes into blogs and web postings and newspaper print and magazine print, you name it. If it's in print out there, LexisNexis is very likely to have it all.
Oh, so it's like the real life Jedi library. If it's not in the LexisNexis, Mr. Speaker, then it doesn't exist. You know, he's like a fucking puppet with that hand gesture shit. I'm just really upset that this representative is this ill-informed about racial viewpoints of haters in this country. I'm shocked that he is so utterly uneducated with the history of groups like the Klan, groups like the White Citizen Council, groups like, well, the John Birch Society. I am utterly and completely baffled to why no one would stand up in there while he's doing and say, hey, I object to the buffoonery. Your graph represents something that is not truly tangible because you're artificially not recognizing people such as Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., been in the game for a long time. Dr. Anderson, been in the game a long time. And you're just going to sit there and act as if white supremacy or white nationalism is like this new concept that just basically happened in the past 5 years. Pretty unsettling. Let's continue.
So this is the only objective way that you can quantify the utilization of this term. White nationalism, virtually unused all the way up until 2016. And there it jumped. And I know the rest of the numbers by memory. I guess they're there. It jumped in 2016, it jumped up to 10,000 times a year, virtually unused. And all of a sudden in 2016, there it goes, 10,000 times a year.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to be the one to call bullshit. Steve Coakley. I just grabbed him.
According to Wikipedia, Steve Coakley was an American political researcher and lecturer who lectured nationally on political and economic issues relating especially to the African American community.
Okay. Now, I just grabbed him up just by random. All right. I just want to break down. I want to see when this video, I'm pulling up one of his videos. Believe it or not, this is high-speed internet. And we're going to see. Hold on. We're going to go back here. I'm going to do two things. I want this in a different. And while that's loading up, we'll go back to that. Steve Coakley. He was born June 17th, 1952. He ascended into the next realm April 11th, 2012, the year of our Lord. He was an American political researcher and lecturer who lectured nationally on political and economic issues relating especially to the African American community. Now, it sounds like this man here was talking about what he's talking about, but way before this graph was even invented. And then YouTube's not even let me bring it up. Wow. Let's just get one little taste, and then we'll go back to the good guy.
I appreciate deeply all of you who bought information. And this is how I go. How much you want to spend? Oh, give me that $100 package. And I appreciate all of you who supported me. And those of you who will, there's some good information here. And long after I'm gone, you'll be spending that information. I'll still be here. When you pass it off to somebody else, I'm still here. When you act on some shit I said, I'm up in here. And these things go on, and no one can stop it because they don't know who it is. They can't break it up because they don't know where to go. And many times I'm in the airport, get into an airport, somebody go. I might not even know their name, but they gave me the code. That's the Bogart. They give me the code. I give them the code back. Much of what we'll talk about is about breaking code. Now I didn't see the flyer. Anybody got a flyer around here? The brother could bring me a flyer of when they have one I can have. Because I didn't have a point to see exactly what it said, but does it say? Researching that.
All right, I'm just gonna jump into it right here. I can tell he's getting something good.
Say Steve Cooley, click. You ever say click into theirs? I don't mean to scare you with that, but that's all right too. There's millions of them out there. They know that too. All right. See if we can get into a little information here today. I'll put some things on the, let's try to cut them out and see how this works.
All right. But now let's get back to the main guy.
The 2017, 30,000 times. In 2018, it's still up there at 20,000 times. Now, how did it happen that a terminology that had been virtually unused all of a sudden became used in multiple times, up to 30,000 times a year, when 1 to 200 times a year is this virtually unused definition down here? And how did it happen that this is the word that gets tagged on me? Is that an accident, Mr. Speaker? I don't think so. And in fact, any objective person looking at the data couldn't come to that conclusion either. So this is the annual utilization, virtually unused up until 2016, then to 10,000 times a year, then up to 30,000 times the next year, and still at 20,000 the following year. This is a weaponized term created by the left to attack conservatives with. It's one.
And like the conservatives nowadays aren't racist. I mean, let's just have that conversation. Are the conservatives nowadays racist? The ones who represent the Republican Party. Do they like to sit back when no black folks are around, say, God, it feels good not having those goddamn beeps around? Yeah, you know, those beeps are, you know, beep, beep. You see how they already destroyed the conversation? I can't even have the honest conversation. A bunch of guys sitting around with cigars, counting stacks of money that they, you know, got through their endeavors. Talking about, it's so good to finally, be away from all those N words. Or how does this sound? Oh, it's so good to finally not be around all those niggers. Oh, hold on. How does this sound? It feels so good not to be around all those niggas. You see how the attack on the way we have to talk nowadays utterly destroys, bastardizes any type of serious conversation pertaining to race and equality, liberation, and reparations. It's easy. Oh, I ain't going to give those descendants of migrant workers, aka slaves, reparations. What? Yes, that's what a lot of textbooks are saying. That the African American slaves were basically immigrant workers, undocumented workers, instead of calling them niggers in the book, subhuman motherfuckers that had no humanity given to them legally. You could do whatever you wanted. You could throw them to alligators. You could cut them up into small pieces. You could rape them until the day they die without anything happening to you. The language has been broken, yeah. And that's why I just like to speak purely and clearly. If you're a decent person, you understand exactly what this man up here, this Represent King, is really talking about. You know what he's really trying to protect and defend. If you're a decent human being, you would join with me, join with us, and say no more. It is time for people to be validated economically and treated as such. And it would truly be a win-win because, as well as you know, a lot of that money will go right from the hands of the poor into the hands of the landlord, into the hands of the utility companies, into the hands of maybe they have loans out, whatever the case may be. So it's really going to energize the economy in a very dynamic way. But let's continue with the madness. Like I said, when I reviewed this video earlier, it just had me railing.
One of their weaponized terms. They have multiple weaponized terms now because they wore out the term racist and they need to make up some new terms that they could be offended by. And so in this one, it shows, so how did this happen that 2016 was the year?
Thank you, brother Easy D. Thank you.
That the term white nationalist was used 10,000 times in that year. And so I asked him, break this thing down, LexisNexis, utilization of white nationalists month by month throughout the year of 2016. That's the jump year down here. So here's the data. From November and December, it's down here used a little more than perhaps you would say. You could still call it virtually unused, but there's a little blip in August. And then it jumps up in November, and it's still up there in December. What happened in?
Yes, Sister Sandra. He said weaponized. We're sitting here analyzing this as the intellectuals we are. I'm sure some of you guys have coffee. You're sitting there, you're watching the show, digesting all this information, this data. But let it be known, this guy is looking at this shit as warfare. And if it's based upon race, look in the mirror and then you can see, are you this guy's potential ally? Or are you this guy's potential target? Because if you haven't got the memo yet, when it comes to brown people, or let's just be honest, unvalued individuals, people that has no value, apparently in this country it's good to murder them, exploit them, enslave them, abuse them. And you better not say nothing about it, or else you're the bad guy. You're weaponizing the fucking truth. Let's continue.
In 2016, that brought about the use of the term white nationalist as almost always a pejorative term, almost always used to attack conservatives. What happened? Well, there was a
Well, you started having conservatives like David Duke, the wizard. Hold on, let's see exactly, was he a Republican or what type of political ideology? What political party did David Duke belong to? Probably Democrat. Nope, Republican. And there it is. Now, when you look at this, Republican Party, David Duke, KKK, Republic, what he's talking about don't make any sense then. Where the hell has he been? Like I said, where has this guy been?
Circumstance that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, November 8th, 2016. And when that happened, there was already a gathering for the hierarchy of the Democratic Party to gather together at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel here in Washington, D.C. And their agenda was to best plan how they were going to utilize what they expected to be would be a Hillary Clinton presidency. They admitted that they had to change their agenda when they got that the surprise of Donald Trump winning the election as opposed to Hillary. And they did change their agenda. But at the Occidental Hotel, by the way, led by George Soros, his face is on the front cover here of Politico's article that tells about this. There's several other articles, Mr. Speaker, but George Soros led on this. And so there they planned how they were going to deal with a Trump presidency, how they were going to try to handcuff and tie down and refuse and resist. Mr. Speaker, if we remember what happened that came into our verbiage also, and I didn't run the LexisNexis numbers on this, but I am certain I'm right. Resistance movement would be also probably a little more used than white nationalists, but we might be able to define that as virtually unused until the conference at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel here in Washington, D.C. that started on the Sunday, November 13th, the Sunday after Trump was elected president. And there they planned how they were going to deal with the Trump presidency, how they were going to handcuff him, tie him down, resist. The resistance movement was born in that hotel by Democrat leadership led by George Soros and no doubt funded by George Soros and the executive director position.
Yeah, and it's, am I the only one who's seeing this movie for what it is? Am I the only one who's seeing that? You know, they keep on throwing out the name of George Soros, basically a known Nazi collaborator, as if he's a friend of the Negro, as if he's truly a friend of black folks. Well, true power, he started Black Lives Matter, don't you know? And to that fool, all I can say is, don't you know Black Lives Matter is basically Gay Lives Matter with blackface on it? They're about transgender, homosexual, lesbian activity. That's why they lives matter. And it just so happens, apparently, there's a lot of, and it really pains me to say this, there's a lot of black fags out there. That's true. Not a black lesbians out there. Not a black bisexual people out there. And then ultimately a lot of black transgenders as well. So what does that truly equate to? A whole segment of population that's still going to be treated like a nigger, an N-word, a beep. But when they try to come into the fold and work with leadership, they're going to get, no, we don't deal with fags around here. That's what they're going to get. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be honest. I hate trying to PC the truth so that, you know, we can just move on with the general conversation, but that's what it is. It's like, it truly is like there is no political solution, but there is an economic one. But it would take decent people starting to political gears to tell these fools up here, these puppets up here in Congress, you will draft a bill that guarantees reparations in the form of a check, money that people can cash out. They can buy land. They can do whatever they need to do. Maybe even leave the country. Because we're going to tell the world, we're going to tell ourselves that we no longer disvalue this aspect of society. We value you. We love you. And most importantly, we, the decent people, the decent citizens, will make it so. Let's continue.
As that was managing over all this was a Soros, former Soros staff person. So they planned the resistance movement, and out of that also came some words to be weaponized: white nationalist, white supremacist, Nazi, fascist. That's what I was talking about in my interview with Trip Gabriel, as what had happened to weaponize language and how it was being used, assigned to people. We should never forget that we have the left in this country in particular, and I hope it's to a lesser degree, and I believe it is from the other side, assigns a belief system to people and then attacks them for the belief system that they have assigned. And they use the words that they've been assigned to use to assign to people for the belief system that they've assigned. And so what we have is virtually unused white nationalists here throughout all these years until we come to 2016. And then we have the events of November 13th, 14th, 15th, checking out on the morning of Wednesday, the 16th of November. That was taking place at the Mandarin Occidental Hotel. Clearly, somebody said, we're going to start using white nationalists against conservatives. Get to it. And they were at it while they were in the hotel, and it showed up with some 5,000 times in that little window of time there. That's now, if you wonder, well, maybe I'm not right on the date, Mr. Speaker. So I had him break down the month of November of 2016. And here's the month of November, the first, second, kind of virtually unused, under 100 times in any given day, until you get to, they checked in here the 13th of November and zing, all the way we go up here to the top and back. This peak right here represents the times that they were in that hotel making the decision and activating the weaponization of a number of terms, but certainly the term white nationalism. And so they all knew what they were doing. They were in that hotel and they knew what they were doing. I'm just not convinced that the people in the leadership on the Republican side knew what was being perpetrated against our ideology, Mr. Speaker. And because it seemed as though a number of my own leadership decided that they were going to jump on the bandwagon too, with no chance for self-defense. And I would reflect that, even if you go back through all of Christianity, if you go back through Judeo-Christianity, if you go back through Western civilization, if you go back through the foundation of American culture and civilization, you can go back to Jesus, you can go back to St. Paul. Everybody accused had a right to face their accusers and had also the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. I can find no exceptions in anybody's framework that's the standard. That's the civilizational standard. I've listened as our minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, has aggressively and effectively, I believe, and I'm glad he's doing it, defended our president of the United States and said that he deserves due process and he deserves a fair process and that he's innocent until proven guilty. I agree with all of that. But Kevin McCarthy doesn't seem to agree that that should be in a manner that I would be treated.
I just want to say this for those who are actually listening to this man talk. Was that Iranian general that was blown to smithereens, was he given due process? Was he allowed to have a fair trial and counsel and known his accuser? Because, see, as long as you're doing moves like that, and you're trying to say basically white nationalism doesn't exist, you kind of really are setting up, the perfect wave to, these liberal scum. We got to do something with the liberal scum. And liberal scum is basically code word for non-white Christian males. Anyone who's non-white Christian males are liberals. Once again, when we simplify shit and people act on it, things become very dangerous. Become very dangerous indeed.
I believe I deserve due process, and I deserve innocent until proven guilty. And I would point out that there is no evidence to make the case against me. No evidence, no real evidence. I have put out the fact check document. It's on my website. It went on in March of last year. No one, it's about 6 pages. No one has poked a hole in any of that rationale. And here's another no one, Mr. Speaker.
I mean, can we be honest? Is there anywhere on paper where Hitler straight up says, "Hey, I want to kill Jews, y'all"? I'm going there for a reason. Is there any place on paper, any of you researchers, academics out there, is there any document in this fucking world where Adolf Hitler, we know it's him, and he actually signed, "I am intentionally killing fucking Jews"? Straight up, y'all. You know that shit don't exist. But the effects from the violence does. Now, I don't know what Dog and Pony Show Mr. King here is trying to evoke, other than making it look like if you talk against racism or hate, then you're really talking against the Republican leadership and Donald Trump. Because he's marrying these ideals in secret, because you're not supposed to talk about it, because apparently, up until 2016, no one talked about these things, which is hogwash unto itself and shows us his limited scope of research and understanding. Let's continue.
Even though Brett Kavanaugh had about 6 or 7 or so accusers, and I believe Brett Kavanaugh was unjust.
This is where he's basically calling you women split tails, and he don't give a shit about you either.
Justly accused in every one of those cases, but at least he had an opportunity to face his accusers, and he had and at least one of them came forward to testify and could be examined by the panel of the Judiciary Committee that was there. Brett Kavanaugh, I believe, was exonerated from those charges. He's now seated on the United States Supreme Court, and I believe that he will go on to be a stellar justice on our United States Supreme Court. But he had a chance to face his accusers, and he had them. And in my case, Mr. Speaker, not only do I have a chance to face my accusers, neither do I have the presumption of innocent until proven guilty. But on top of that, I don't have any accusers, not one. Of the tens of thousands of people that I have dealt with face to face in my years in public life, roughly a quarter of a century in public life, we've been in construction business dealing with people clear back to 1975. There's not one individual that's come forward and said that I have treated them in any kind of disrespectful, disparaging, or racist way of any kind whatsoever.
Oh my God, I can hear Schultz now. I know nothing. I know nothing.
Don't have an accuser to face, not one, unless it might be hearsay, and even the hearsay doesn't seem to be out there. This is the analysis of the weaponization of language and the eager embracement of it by my own leadership, who's denied me any due process. And so
it almost sounds like leadership knows he's a little fascist in training. No, I gotta play something after this to even this out so everyone knows what time it really is.
Here I am, the fourth member of Congress in all of history to be removed from my committees. Only the fourth, Mr. Speaker. And the other three, fairly modern history, James Traficant, who stood on this floor and said, "Beam me up, Scotty." He was convicted of something like 9 different federal felonies, and he ran for re-election from prison. Yeah. And we lost a couple of Republicans in this Congress, one from Buffalo and one from California, either convicted or confessed of federal felonies. I regret that. But that's 3 of 4 are federal felons. And then there's me. I'm treated like a federal felon by my own leadership in this House of Representatives because somebody called the hit from up the chain above them. And they decided that they needed to do that under the command of the individual or individuals that called that hit. So only 4 people removed from all their committees in the history of this Congress. 3 are either convicted or confessed federal felons. And there's me, and there's not even a rule that I violated, let alone a law, let alone a federal violation, a felony.
Almost sounds like karma. You know, like he's done some dirty deeds. And somehow the dirty deeds manifest by him getting, basically neutered. A lot of his congressional balls were snipped and tucked. Now, I'm sorry. I'm a pretty open guy. I can't defend this guy. I can't defend anything he's saying because honestly, his Jedi mind trick don't work on me. This is not the political conclusion you're looking for. Oh yeah, this is not the political conclusion I'm looking for. White nationalism don't exist. Yeah, white nationalism don't exist. It don't work on me, y'all. I'm hoping it don't work on you either. Let's continue and then we'll wrap this thing up.
To be treated like a federal felon by my own leadership for a made-up story that doesn't hold up cannot hold up under the scrutiny of history, and it must be rectified. And so, on top of that, I've heard our esteemed minority leader say that there's no constitutional charge against Donald Trump for impeachment, that they're made up charges on the part of the Democrats, and that it's either treason, bribery, high crimes, or misdemeanor, and the president has violated none of those. And I agree with him. That's true. None of those reasons for impeachment of a president exist in the activities that have been examined here in this House of Representatives, even down in the secret bunker of Adam Schiff's. Don't exist. So they made up a couple of charges, and one of them was obstruction of Congress, and the other one was about putting our nation at risk. Well, that's a judgment call, and I think the president made the right judgment call on Soleimani. He's made a lot of right judgment calls up and down the line. But because you disagree with the president is not a reason to impeach him. There's no statute no law, no rule that the president is guilty of, or at least been proven to be guilty of. There's no substantive information that supports that allegation. They impeached the president of the United States in this House of Representatives on the 18th of December because they don't like Donald Trump. And in part of what they cooked up in the Mandarin Hotel on the following week after he was elected president in 2016. Those are some of the reasons. The biggest reason is they need a shield from prosecution and the investigations of prosecution that are taking place now in the Department of Justice and the FBI, looking into the weaponization of our federal government for Colorado purposes, for going in and misrepresenting information to the FISA court, for perhaps duping a FISA judge, or maybe having a FISA judge that should have been a little more alert. How many times did James Comey sign a FISA request when he knew the information was false? You can go on and on.
Yeah, we could. Now, while this guy's been obviously tripping, listen to this little tidbit of history. And this is coming from one state over from where he's at. He's actually in Iowa. So maybe he was down there in those hog confinement centers sniffing that methane. But listen to this, y'all.
Everybody was determined by the Grand Dragon. The governor, the state senators, city mayor, police chief, the sheriff.
It was almost 100 years ago, and here we are again with a similar environment, politically and socially.
It is a cautionary tale. If we are not in denial of the power of the Klan in Colorado, we are better set up to be more honest about ourselves and who we are now.
This program was
flourishes in Colorado.
The Klan was prominent throughout the state and had a chapter clavern in all 64 counties.
The original Klan, right after the Civil War, for 6 or 7 years in the South, was a crucial force for forcing Black subordination. And then there's the Klan of the 1920s, which is more or less nationwide. And then in our time, there is a recreated third round of the Klan.
We need to study the KKK for the simple reason that the terror that they inflicted on this country in the past is not revisited in the present and doesn't move forward in the future.
It's really hard to imagine how casually racist American society was in the 1920s. It was not unheard of to have lynchings of Italian immigrants or Mexicans or African Americans, even in a place like Colorado.
One of the great indicators of this growing xenophobia was the demographic.
High. That's Colorado, yeah, everybody. You know, the Denver airport with the New World Order bullshit all built into it. This is the history of that joint. Hey, also, that's where our nuclear missile command's at, too. NORAD. Think about that.
This movie, The Birth of the Nation, probably the bestseller of its time, picturing a picture of these innocent white women in the South being haunted by blacks, glorifying the old South, denigrating black folks.
It showed white males dressed up in Klan uniforms, standing up for the white race against a threat. And they were depicted as knights. They were on horses and they had lances.
And it really was a movie that was about the scourge of Black folks in the country.
A Georgia businessman, a member of various fraternal lodges named William Joseph Simmons, revived the Ku Klux Klan. He created a social organization like the Rotary Club, except that it was based on Simmons' definition of 100% Americanism, white, native-born Protestant. And he created a hierarchy of recruiters. They called them Kleagles, who will go around the country and start local chapters, sell memberships to the Klan.
William Simmons shows up at the Brown Palace Hotel and in 1921 sets up a little group called the Denver Doers Club. And this evolves into what becomes the Klan.
The Ku Klux Klan comes to Denver and quickly spreads across the state with strongholds in Grand Junction and Canyon City.
Now, hold on. I want to be fair. Now, let's jump back to what old boy was saying way up here. Hold on. Now, listen.
For the New York Times, where the conventional, not a magic keyboard, can outpace the people on this floor. For you, Mr. Speaker, is this. What did the term white nationalism mean in the year 2000 when it was virtually unused?
Okay. This is what white national is, though. Check this out.
Klan ideology mirrors the sentiments of the day. People are eager to try something new.
Coming out of the First World War, Americans were done with international adventures.
We were just coming off a period of tremendous reform, the progressive era. There was a tremendous crackdown against labor unions and others who might be affiliated with socialism.
Prohibition, women's suffrage, urban reform, immigration reform. Americans by the 1920s had enough. There were massive strikes in the United States. A lot of this unrest was blamed on Eastern and Southern European immigrants.
And also, this ties into the prohibition issue. Those Irish were still drinking their whiskey. The Germans still wanted their beer. The Italians still drink their wine, despite the law. These were lawless foreigners. We should send it back to wherever they came from.
In places like Pueblo and Trinidad, coal companies are importing huge waves of new immigrants. On the Western Slope, fruit orchards needed cheap seasonal labor as well.
There were people who believed that our nation was changing, and not in a way that was positive for them. This provided fertile ground for the Klan to recruit in Colorado.
The widespread failure of prohibition seemed to many Americans to indicate that America's morals were sliding. The automobile created these new private spaces for young people to get together.
The appeal in the 1920s for a lot of women was to get out and work, the roaring 20s, shorter skirts. The Klan was aghast at these kinds of things.
The Klan to this day always did see themselves as a law and order institution, that they were protecting America.
This crime fixation, free-floating anxiety, what do we do after a world war? We have to get things pulled back together. We have to have the central values of 100% Americanness.
And the Klan, they were going to stop the corruption and bring law and order to the Queen City of the Plains.
The Klan has always been, at least historically, a very broad-based organization.
It opposed alcohol and opposed extramarital sex, pregnancy out of wedlock, Catholics.
It was based upon discrimination against minority groups, the Negro and the Catholic and the Jew. There are a lot of people who fall for that kind of thing.
There's a weird hierarchy of titles. The Imperial Wizard is the national leader. That was Simmons. The leader of a state was known as the Grand Dragon. And Colorado's Grand Dragon was a man named John Galen Locke. John Galen Locke had moved to Colorado as a young man. He had served in the Spanish-American War in the Philippines, and then he got a medical degree in homeopathy.
He was a person of excessive confidence and vision, very arrogant. He was a figure who knew how to work systems and how to be not an elected official himself, but to manipulate them within an inch of their lives.
John Galen Locke was an odd-looking man. He was rotund.
Weighed 250 pounds. He was short. He was fat. Some people called him a toad. He set up a private office at 1325 Glenarm Place. You would see John Galen Locke sitting there in a throne, guarded by 2 Great Danes and also bodyguards.
He was reasonably intelligent. His office was filled with armor and things that came from the Middle Ages. He was a romantic. He thoroughly believed in what he was doing.
He kept, as his personal secretary, a Catholic. He was married to a Catholic. His lawyer was Jewish.
He was really a quite courageous man indeed. Dr. Locke had no animosity whatsoever for Jewish or Catholic or Negro. He loved these people. He would do anything to help them if they were ill. And he was so unconscious of...
You just can't marry his daughter, though, or his sister, or his cousins, or his mother, or whatever. You know, it is what it is, folks. And if you think that little system of power went away, you're sadly mistaken. Let's continue.
Of the social consequences of what he was doing. It never occurred to him that he was doing a great disservice. To him, the Klan was a wonderful opportunity for showmanship. Oh, believe me, those Klansmen were sincere. They thought this was good. They were going to make Klansmen out of every Catholic in the state. They were going to make Klansmen out of every Jew before they got through. They thought they were saving the world. They preyed upon these people and just...
Notice they wasn't going to make no Klansmen out of the Negro, as they call us.
To death. They applied economic pressures that were fantastic, and many bankruptcies were caused by the ostracizing of people.
Locke's primary motivation was not racism, but power. Under his rule, he turned Colorado's Ku Klux Klan into an extremely powerful voting bloc.
John Galen Locke had 138 paid organizers. would start out usually with respectable established institutions, such as the Masons or the Protestant churches, and they would appear all of a sudden in their regalia in the middle of a service and donate, give money, build up goodwill, and say, we will protect you against these foreigners, against these evil elements.
Some of our best men got sucked into this thing and found out afterwards just how badly they had been misled.
We were Klan Central. Colorado had the second highest per capita membership after Indiana. There were maybe 35 or 40,000 members.
Did you hear that? Where's Pence from? The great state of Indiana.
Nobody really knows. The Klan claimed as many as 75,000 or even up to a 250,000 what they called loyal residents.
From the high and mighty to just your average everyday coal miner. Everybody was in the Klan.
Locke was pretty good in familiarizing himself with the powers that be, with people like Gano Center, who ran a very popular restaurant here, and he changed his name to the Cool Cozy Cafe. And he also sold Sienna cigars. The Catholics, you are not Americans.
Gano Center was a Grand Cyclops, which is a regional director of the Ku Klux Klan. And there were very few people in Colorado who were more enthusiastic about Klan membership than Gano and Lorena Center.
Laura Center organized the Women's Auxiliary of the Klan, which got to be a pretty big deal here. They were particularly worried about orphans going to any Catholic orphanages.
So the Klan has women members and women leaders. There's nothing surprising about that.
In 1921,
Now, where do you think that information was leaked out about how the Catholics be raping them kids? I'm telling you, this thing gets deep. Gets deep as hell. But we're going to go back to old boy here in a second so you understand how ludicrous what he was saying truly is.
the liberal, labor-oriented newspaper, the Denver Express, begins covering the Klan. In reaction, the KKK closes its Denver recruiting office and its Kleagles set up in Colorado Springs, where they have little luck. They are welcomed in Pueblo with promises to enforce law and order against the many immigrants working in the steel mills and coal mines. Back in Denver, the Klan exerts its power.
Warren Gash received a letter in January of 1922 threatening him.
This colored man who had been ordered out of town by the Klan simply because he was a caretaker for some widow. And the rumor went out that he was too familiar with her.
This letter said, your hide is worth more to us than to you. We're going to get you. And he took this to Philip Van Cise, the city district attorney.
Van Cise was appalled. He couldn't believe that a citizen of Denver would receive such a virulent, nasty death threat. Philip Van Cise, he was in the Colorado National Guard. He served as a peacekeeper at Ludlow. As soon as the Klan reared its head, Philip Van Cise became one of its earliest and most vocal opponents.
He was the type of man who would prosecute his own grandmother if she violated the law, and by George, that's the kind of public official we needed. For instance, a packing of juries.
The jury commissioner, being a Ku Kluxer himself, the jury lists were made up in the office of Dr. Locke down on Glenarm Street. I would say 75% of the police department belonged to the Klan.
You didn't get a promotion if you weren't a member of the Klan.
Van Cise decides to investigate the Klan, gets 5 members of his staff to join, infiltrate the Klan to try to build up evidence against them.
In the summer of 1922, the Klan holds its first public meeting in Estes Park with thousands of hooded Klansmen gathering.
Now, let's jump back to this guy.
Or in any year prior to that, when it was also virtually unused. Then what did it meet in 2001, 2, 3, all the way up? You can see that it's virtually unused all the way up until it never even starts to move until 2015. This is a LexisNexis search of the term white nationalism or white nationalist derivatives of this term. And LexisNexis, Mr. Speaker, goes into blogs and web postings and newspaper print and magazine print. You name it, if it's in print out there, LexisNexis is very likely to have it all.
Well, LexisNexis missed this one, didn't she, bud?
One year, Denver's mayor, Benjamin Stapleton, openly supports the Klan and offers city space for them to spread their message. While the Klan's popularity grows, so does their illegal actions, including kidnapping and conspiracy.
Patrick Walker, a 19-year-old, supposedly had intimate relationships with a young woman. John Galen Locke found out about this, and so they kidnapped him. And they threatened to beat him or even kill him if he didn't marry the young woman. And so Walker did so, but then he went to the police. Ultimately, Locke and other conspirators were indicted for kidnapping. There are dozens of accounts of harassment, of intimidation, of cross burnings in people's yards, of bombs on people's front porches, of beatings, of kidnapping.
Walter Walker was described as a little Napoleon. He was already the most powerful Democratic politician on the Western Slope.
There it is. Democrat, hate you, and Republican, hate you. That's why it's so important to get decent people into positions of power to get them reparation checks flowing.
Runs the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel, and he wanted to be the Grand Cyclops of the Grand Junction Klan. It was in August of 1924. The Grand Junction Daily Sentinel described it as silent and impressive.
So this is the only
display.
objective way that you can quantify the utilization of this term. White nationalism, virtually unused all the way up until 2000.
So what the fuck is this guy tripping on? That's why this keeps bringing me back. You know, white nationalism wasn't using. It's like he's trying to paint it because the term wasn't used. Therefore, there wasn't people getting harmed by the actions of white nationalists. It's really disgusting.
Actually, 16. And there it jumped. And I know the rest of the numbers by memory. I guess they're there. It jumped in 2016, it jumped up to 10,000 times a year, virtually unused. And all of a sudden in 2016,
hold on,
16, there it goes, 10,000 times a year.
I want to show, you know, I got to do this. We're not going to go back to the other one. We're going to go here. I got to do this for you. I'm going to do some Admiral Throng type shit for you guys. To understand the psychology of the beings that we're dealing with, I want to show you the type of DAOs that are being made. Now you're like, what? A DAO, because it's manufactured, it had a team that thought that this would be a good idea to do this or that or the third. It shows you what's in a group of people. And it'll be self-evident that we need to hold on. Okay, let's. Oh, come on. Hold on, Yao. It's only going to be a second. It'll be just a little second more. And then everything's going to be good. I don't know if... oh, my gosh. Dear God. You know, I really don't look at all this stuff. All right. A lot of this stuff. Okay. I pretty much look at all this shit, man. That's how I have such interesting, I guess, outlooks on things. But it's still haven't. Oh my God. It should have been up in this area, but apparently it's not. It has to be because... Oh, here it is right here. You guys need a good laugh. Here's a good laugh.
If you write anything on your computer, you need to get Grammarly.
Come
on. Grotesque plastic statue of a naked baby thing with like really giant mutant feet, and they'll be doing things like, you know, picking their noses and other such unpleasant things. Blur out its genitals. Yep, based on the Glooby idea would be a good thing, but and thrice. Yeah. So, yes, real life expressions, claims the box. If your baby is making this expression in real life, its father was Satan. Yep, it's got a big sort of flowery logo, Glooby Dolls, trademark, and it's copyright 1995 PMS. And what a jolly fella he is. Anything else in the box? Oh, yeah. Faces for the future. What the fuck does that mean? Real life expressions. Scowl, howl, and smile with all vinyl faces. All Vinyl Faces sounds like a 70s band. Cuddly soft bodies and quality clothing. Imported by PMS, directly from hell. So yeah, it's a really dirty box as well. For this is old stock, one imagines. Let's have a look at the little blighter then. How do we release him? Here we are. Activate his hate circuits by undoing this, and away we jolly well go. Off with you, Joyce. And oh man, I honestly thought it had cobwebs on its face for a second, but no, that is just some sort of bag to keep the face from being damaged, or to keep the hat on or the hair in place or something. I don't know. Also, I don't really care. So yeah, he's got his jumpers on, and he's more realistically proportioned than the gloomy statue thing, thank goodness. But that face, whoa, cheeky expression apparently. Oh yes, look. Oh God, it's gone a bit Macaulay Culkin there. Off it comes. Don't worry, you'll be going straight in the bin after this, mate, or possibly in a big fire, or maybe you'll come alive and stab me in my sleeve. Yeah, I think that's the most likely. Maybe I'll put your hat back on, mate. Cheeky expression. Yeah, it's of course, well, it's slightly dead-eyed, but it's a doll, you do expect that, but my goodness, that just looks kind of slightly evil, doesn't it? Well, don't worry, it gets much worse. Second up, how about a girl gloomy doll with a slightly cheekier expression? Here she is, sticking her tongue out. This didn't sell for £3.50. I do want, and they look a bit kind of discombobulated, but something has gone hideously awry. Also, I've just realised, no net on these later ones. Anyway, well, I say later, I assume they're later, but I don't believe there's actually any form of... there we are.
Gotta break that cycle, new ways to survival. Gotta break that cycle, spine strong, gonna rival. Gotta break that cycle, keep an eye on my rivals. Gotta break that cycle, real life rap revival. 20 years past, weird Albert Einstein is vain. Skin that I'm in, hold truths from the flames. They never met a noose, but there's atoms in my veins. Megatron, photons, overpopulate my brain. Electrifying the silence, blinded time with science. Rapping from the trappers, see they change that shining. It's on game backwards now, generations is pilots. All evil is the sign of the time. Thanks to the system and the label who sign them. Sleeping with the enemy who push behind them. Communists who claim money for spine. So peace and unity, we never can find them. No love in these streets, neighborhoods is dying. Crime don't sleep, mama inside crying. Sons want a peace, but it's no denying. For a buck in the cell, long lines just to buy in. Gotta break that ways to survival. Gotta break that cycle, spine strong, go around. Gotta break that cycle, keep an eye on my rivals. Gotta break that cycle, real life rap revival. Gotta break that cycle, new ways to survival. Gotta break that cycle, spine strong, go around. Gotta break that cycle, keep an eye on my rivals. Gotta break that cycle, real life rap revival. Glass full of naps, cabbage patch on my bench. Got corn in the fields, livestock on the deck. See through birds clear from the eyes of a vet. Blow piece of lips to the right and the left. Feel it from the middle so you feel it in your chest. And it's the same trapping and this icing from my chef. Tenderized to my liking with the spices off my shelf. Punchline spiking so the Kool-Aid melt. New life tossing up. Hope you see for self. Loose icing from the chef as I look up my chef with the spices that I'm placing. You can tell for yourself. Punchlines keep spiking so the Kool-Aid melt. Gotta break that cycle. Gotta break that cycle. Gotta break that cycle. Gotta break that cycle. Real life rap revival. Gotta break that cycle. New ways to survival. Gotta break that cycle. Spine strong, go arrival. Gotta break that cycle. Keep an eye on my rifles. Gotta break that cycle. Real life rap revival. Gotta hold on. Rock with me. That's your rock. Real peace. Gotta break that cycle, new ways to survival. Gotta break that cycle, spine strong on the rival. Gotta break that cycle, keep an eye on my rivals. Gotta break that cycle, real life rap revival. Love,
finish up with this guy because he's basically, this is the new news. Like I said, it's going to get so bad in a minute. You start saying stuff about white nationalism, you're the bad guy.
Monty, he's made a lot of right judgment calls up and down the line. But because you disagree with the president is not a reason to impeach him. There's no statute, no law, no rule that the president is guilty of, or at least been proven to be guilty of. There's no substantive information that supports that allegation. They impeached the president of the United States in this House of Representatives on the 18th of December because they don't like Donald Trump. And in part of what they cooked up in the Mandarin Hotel on the following week after he was elected president in 2016. Those are some of the reasons. The biggest reason is they need a shield from prosecution and the investigations of prosecution that are taking place now in the Department of Justice and the FBI, looking into the weaponization of our federal government for political purposes, for going in and misrepresenting information to the FISA court, for perhaps duping a FISA judge, or maybe having a FISA judge that should have been a little more alert. How many times did James Comey sign a FISA request when he knew the information was false? You can go on and on. If that comes forward and indictments are brought forward on that, that's going to crush the other side. They need this as impeachment as a shield. And that's the biggest reason why they decided to move forward. But I believe the foundation was laid in that Mandarin Hotel on that weekend starting on Sunday, the 13th of November, 2016, and concluding on Wednesday when they checked out that morning. I believe that's when much of this strategy was put together. And I would go further, Mr. Speaker, and that is that we had the Mueller investigation that tied this country up for nearly 2 years. And the strategy on that, I believe, was discussed in that hotel room. It's just too close to the pattern of the things that flowed out of there.
Keep shining. Worldwide. Don't it feel good when you're good? What you do smell great. Everywhere, keep it moving, moving, drop, and you circle square.
All right, yeah. I'm at the hour point, actually a little bit over. But this will conclude TPIM Live for today. This has been the evening broadcast. Today's date, January 10th, 2020, the year of our Lord. You know, yeah, hopefully this is giving you guys something to think about. Maybe research yourself. Get caught up on the reality. As they say, the kitchen will be getting hot. If you can't stand it, you're not going to be let out of the kitchen. They're just going to toss your ass in the oven. On that note, live your life of integrity without hate, envy, or greed. And as always, brothers and sisters, I sincerely ask, please, let's try to be kinder to each other. Peace and power, unity and victory, dignity and respect, liberation. I'm out.